This is in response to the thread on easy jazz lines. In response to one of the posters, Stan G. I certainly hope it's not the ghost of Stan Getz, but if it is, that's fine. The question was modes, my interest in modes. And also in reviewing the entire rubric of this thread, which is getting started, I thought I would go back, even though I'm working on the lines part. I thought I would go back and try to explain what I mean by using the modes in seeing things. Now, this comes from the idea that many of the guitarists that I know or speak with are completely familiar with the Cage system and pentatonic scales. They would certainly note if they were using a G form pentatonic and they meant to move up, they would use an E form and then a D form, and vice versa. If they were at an A form and they moved down, they would use a C form pentatonic caged system. And I thought that this business of stitching the fretboard together using the cage system is also going to work, of course, with the mode system. If you were in a Dorian mode diatonically across here, in the fifth position, let's say, then you would be Ionian in the next position down, Locrian, and so on and so forth. It's a system of stitching the fretboard together. And then I was going to go on to look at, if this was successful, to look at seeing other things like phrases and altered scales and so on. But anyway, in terms of what started, I began with the G major 7, G major 7 scale. And you'll notice on the sixth string, you have one pattern to memorize. That's G to A. And when you move over to the fifth string, you have a second pattern to memorize, which is a half step and a whole step, which is fine. And then at string 4, you have the inverse of that. And now you have completed one scale, one interval, or one level of scale. You have 3 strings and 3 patterns to memorize. Okay. When I went to the second octave, I noticed something right off the bat. These 2 strings mirror one another, string 3 and 4. Now, not being that knowledgeable in the working of the human mind, I know a few things, and the human mind looks for patterns as readily and as quickly as it can possibly do that. And what happens is once you find a pattern, your mind sort of buttonholes that, and then it goes on to the rest. In other words, this business was a part of your memory right away. And then you worried about the rest of it for the octave, and we have this pattern again. And then finally, a fourth pattern here on the number 1 string. So we have virtually 4 patterns over 6 strings. Pattern 1, pattern 2, pattern 3, which is the inverse, pattern 3 again, then that pattern 1 again, so we're at pattern 3, and then pattern 4 here. Okay, so I move through the other modes. And to get to the Locrian, F sharp. The F sharp tone over G. Once again, we're dealing with G major 7 here. The interesting thing is the first 2 strings now mirror one another. And exactly what happened here on string 4 and 5 is now happening on string 5 and 6. You're buttonholing these patterns because they mirror one another. And then certainly we're back over to strings 3 and 4, which I believe we've already committed to extensive memory. So we have these just 2 patterns now. Then this back to pattern 3. And then if you happen to want to mirror the first string with the 6th string, it would carry you to A. Okay. Certainly this appeared to be an easier recall for me. In any case, I could easily see even though I was Locrian, F sharp, if someone were to ask for a G major 7 scale, I would rest my finger on the Locrian F sharp, but I would start playing, but I still see the pattern. Sometimes. That made memorizing diatonically the G major 7 scale. While I was fooling around with this a little bit, I tried to slide up into Dorian. So when I came to the D, and suddenly the pattern number, what I will call pattern number 1, repeats itself on these 2 strings. So now we have this. And if I move up 1 fret, what I call the second pattern, which is the inverse of the first, repeats itself. Okay, so here I was now in G Dorian. At A, all I have to do is fill in the rest of the strings, string number 6. It happens to be a pattern number 2, a pattern 3, and 2 pattern number 1s, and then pattern 2. Okay. It's just a matter of scaffolding, really, and then you continue up to Phrygian, Lydian, and all the rest. But at this point, I wanted to make it a tool, a kind of a tool that I could use to internalize other things. So what I did is I committed Autumn Leaves inside of this Dorian pattern. So there I am in the... That's in order to keep it, my interest level up a little bit. I wanted to internalize that song. And of course, noodling around, you come upon different things. But by way of explanation, that's my use of the modes. So I can make a statement almost in any key. If someone was to say D major 7, I immediately go to Mixolydian at A, which is the 5, and I can make a statement. It's just a way of stitching the information together. Now, I'm taking some of the lines from this book, the Brody book, Steve Brody, I don't really know how to pronounce his name, but I'm taking these lines and I'm going to see these lines inside of the modes. in order to commit them to memory, and also take pieces of them to build. And I'm going to use Autumn Leaves also. But that's the explanation of it's not playing modally. I've been told a number of times by Barry Harris. My teacher was from Barry Harris class. That modal playing is not in his interest, and it certainly is not in my interest. I don't care for modal playing, but we use the modes to see other things.